Nation! You're now listening to the most opinionated, the most exciting, the most son of a Schmidt. You guys actually do something useful here, right? Like, is anything you do even beneficial to someone? Whatever. Now to the show that literally has tens, that's right, tens of followers. The show that brings the Ozone Radio Network to levels of mediocrity that only Michigan fans would know. This is the Sons of Schmidt, starring Mike Meals and Brandon Zimmerman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hey, welcome back, Buckeye Nation. This is the Sons of Schmidt podcast. This is season 3, episode 15. Initially starting the week, this was an episode entitled Big Ten Champions. And we just kind of decided we'd throw things for a little bit of a loop. We might have to put a new label on this one after today.
What happened today?
I'm not real sure. It's a slow news day.
It's nothing just a real, Tuesday.
Yeah, nothing fancy. Tuesdays with Brandon, you know how they go. Obviously, as you heard him chime in, that is my co-host, Brandon Zimmerman. What is going on, Brandon?
What's up, Michael Dean?
Oh,
I'm doing good.
Not a whole lot here.
Nice and cold here. A lot of snow.
Dude, it's cold here.
I don't want to hear it. It's like
it was like digits. Yeah, it was basically the same. It was like 50 today.
It normally takes me 20 minutes to get to work. It took me over an hour today.
Well, that's because you can't drive.
No, it's because everyone else can't drive.
Sure, blame them.
There wasn't even anything on the road this morning. It's so frustrating. I hate people.
We've officially evolved from a football podcast to bitching about the weather.
I'm going into my Son of Schmidt right now. No.
So now that I haven't had a chance to say it, obviously I'm your host, Mike Meals. So welcome to the show, everybody. A little bit of a recap here before we get going. Obviously, Ohio State on Saturday won the Big Ten championship. Moved up to number 5 or number 6, depending on who you go by. 6 in the college football playoff, but they were 5 in the AP poll. 12-1 for the season, 9-1 in conference, obviously. Secured themselves a trip to Pasadena to take on Washington in the Rose Bowl on January 1st. So with that being said, it's going to be a little bit of a ways out. We'll obviously do a little bit of a season recap going on over the next couple weeks. And as we get closer to Christmas and New Year's Day, we'll obviously touch on that game a lot more once you have a chance to really get into everything. First things first, Brandon. Did you hear any news today?
Yeah, I saw something on the Twitter machine about
Maryland hired a new coach. That's obviously the
Maryland hired Mike Loxley.
Yeah, so that's the big thing we have to cover. Nothing important or anything. So
yeah, I don't think anything else happened.
Okay, so hey, I saw you had it up there just a minute ago, but what are you drinking tonight?
I tried something new tonight. I'm going with it's called Calumet Farms from Kentucky. It's pretty damn good. It's probably one of my favorite ones that I've tried of all these like new ones that I'm trying. It's pretty damn good beer or bourbon. Sorry. Pretty damn good bourbon.
That like a beer, we got a problem.
Yeah, it's called the Single Rack Black, whatever that calls. Sounds racist as shit to me, but it's good.
Well, I'm so glad that this is completely ran off the rails. We have nothing to worry about for the rest of the show.
I'm starting early.
I actually have, because of the specialty that we have going on, I didn't get my my normal bourbon glass. I'm actually drinking out of this thing here, but I've got a bunch of ice in here, and I have the Eagle Rare back in here tonight. So
that is Lauren's glass, isn't it?
It very much so is. You know I'm not a Packers fan. So
Fudge Packer.
Maybe. Before we get into, obviously, the big news, as we've obviously been alluding to here, Ohio State did not make the college football playoffs. The final rankings came out. Bama, Clemson, Notre Dame, OU get in. Georgia's 5, Ohio State 6, Michigan 7, Central Florida's 8, Washington and Florida round out the top 10. Now, we're not going to get into the debate here probably at least for a little bit or maybe even another week looking at this because it is a big enough of a deal. Any thoughts, surprises, and just real quick recap on the College Football Playoff Committee? Because for me, the only thing that even comes into play that is something to even complain about is realistically, there is no shot for a group of 5 team to ever get into the playoffs with UCF not getting even so much as a look this year. But what's your thoughts on anything here you got, man?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely – I wouldn't say there's no shot. I would – if there's like – it works out perfectly where a group of 5 plays a very big Power 5 conference team out of conference. You know, it just happens to work out that way, and then they go undefeated. I think it may work out for them. Like if UCF had knocked out, you know, Penn State or something back in September, I think that would have been enough to help them out. But like you think about it, really, I mean, their only decent win this year was Cincinnati, who is a pretty weak top 25 team. Like we both love Fickle and what he's doing out there, and it's cool to see another Ohio team do so good. But I mean, when that's your best win, you really can't argue too much. And I had a few people texting me. You guys know, like I've with the military, like friends that are all kinds of different teams. You know, it's not pretty centralized to Ohio or something. But a lot of people saying how they thought UCF should make it, but I mean, my point is this. Yeah, it's awesome that you've won 25 straight games. I think it is. It's been over 2 years. Mm-hmm. But ask yourself how many of those teams in the top 10, if they played that same exact schedule, would have also won all 25 of those games. And the answer is almost all of them. You know, like, you know, there might have been a slip up here or there, but I would put money that most of really the top 15 probably would have won that same schedule. So part of me knew that Ohio State wasn't going to make it. There's a very flawed system. I talked about it last year quite a bit. I feel like the precedent that was set last year was even more egregious than the one that they set this year where, you know, they have Georgia in front of the Buckeyes. I thought last year having Alabama in the playoffs was just horrible. Having a team that lost their final game, having a team that didn't even make their conference championship, be able to just kind of moonwalk back their way into the playoffs was a horrible precedent to set last year. This year, you've got the same thing where it doesn't really make a difference from 5 on, you know, but like to put Georgia ahead of Ohio State goes against everything that they've been saying is criteria. So everything they did last year went against it. Everything they did this year, they went against it. And that's why I was telling people, like, you just don't know what they are going to do. I mean, all these people have thought that they were sure on what the committee was going to do. It's just bullcrap. I mean, chances are Ohio State was not going to make it, but nobody knows what that committee is going to do. Like, they have no precedent. They have no set ways about how they do things. So, I mean, I would not have been shocked if Ohio State made the playoffs out of nowhere. I would not have been shocked if Notre Dame was suddenly pulled out. I would have not have been shocked if UCF made it. But, I mean, the precedent that they are setting is just – it's not good for college football. And I think – I said it last year where you're going to see teams start scheduling really crappy out of conference. I don't even hate the Southeastern Conference at this point. I've said it numerous times last year. I said it again this week. Like, they are the only conference doing it right. They are looking out for their people. They have a system, a flawless system set up for their teams to succeed. Their commissioner cares about it. Every team cares about everyone else in the SEC succeeding. And it's a flawless system. I mean, you don't play any decent teams out of conference. You play as crappy a teams as you can. You get as many teams in your conference to that 3-0, 4-0 level so that they are undefeated going into conference play. That also leads to every AP coach or every AP pollster and coach seeing, oh, look, Missouri's 4-0. Let's throw them into the top 25. And you suddenly have, 7, 8, 9 SEC teams ranked in the top 25. Then you get into conference play and you just have ranked team playing ranked team week after week. And they stay in because like, oh, well, number 19 lost to number 9, so we should probably drop them like 23. And then they win a few more games, and it's a constant rotation of those same teams that play really bad out of conference teams, go undefeated, and they just manage to stay in the top 25 all day. I mean, you look at a team like Kentucky, who has been absolute garbage for years, and this year they got a 4-0 start. And next thing you know, they're ranked like number 10. And they just rode that the rest of the year. It didn't matter how many teams they lost in conference because they were losing to other ranked teams that I think the lowest they dropped to was like number 17 or something. You've got Florida, that's the same way, who was another team that was absolute garbage last year. They lost, 7 games?
Something like that. Yeah. This
year they went out of conference, got a few wins, got ranked up there, right there with Kentucky, was able to knock off LSU, who's another team that got jumped up pretty good. I mean, Florida, no other conference could have a team that has lost 2 games by over 20 points, a third game by over 10 points, and still be ranked top 10. Nobody else. So, I mean, it's a flawless system. It may sound like I hate them, but like I am envious of them because the Big Ten, Pac-12, Big 12, ACC just kind of gets the pass because of Clemson, but nobody else is that smart. And I mean, hell, we had Delaney sitting there like, well, if Ohio State makes it, they make it. If they don't, they don't. Like nobody gives a shit. Like they are just counting in money. Where the SEC guys like, oh, we got like 5 teams that I think should be in this 4-team playoff. Like he is fighting for it. And I mean, like they've got it down, and every conference needs to go that route too. I mean, I don't want to see another big out of conference game until the college football playoffs are changed. And luckily next year there's no out of conference game, but of course Delaney screwed the Buckeyes, and the Big Ten schedule's freaking brutal. So.
Okay. Well, so much for that being a quick discussion. So, real quick, we're going to take our break. When we come back, we're going to flip things around a little bit and touch on some news. So we'll pause real quick and we'll go from there.
This is the Ozone Radio Network, a Hayes and Cannon production. For the latest episodes of all your favorite podcasts covering Buckeye Nation, look for the Ozone Radio Network on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Speaker. You can also find the latest episodes by clicking on the Hayes and Cannon tab at theozone.net. Once again, here are the Sons of Schmidt.
All right, so we know that's been no surprise. Everybody that's listening to this has already heard the news because it came out today as we're preparing to record. Urban Meyer has officially announced that he is stepping down and retiring from coaching at The Ohio State University. He will apparently be working with the athletic department and staying on campus. So in honor of Urban's retirement, something that we talked about a couple of times on here. It's not really necessarily a shock, even though it was surprising when it happened. We talked about the possibility of not seeing Urban Meyer coach next year and stepping down at the end of this season. It was you don't really have to be a fortune teller to sit around and say, hey, Coach Day is going to fill in for him after, the first 3 games this season. But still, nonetheless, what we want to do now, we're going to go over a couple things here. We just want to touch back on the Urban Meyer era at Ohio State. Couple brief highlights for everybody. I know you probably heard them all by now, but Urban Meyer has been a head coach for 17 years, 7 years at Ohio State. Overall, he has a career record of 186-32. It's good for 85.3% wins. At Ohio State, he's 82-9 for 90% win total, 54-4 in the Big Ten. He's 11-3 overall in bowl games. He's the only modern coach to win a national championship in 2 different conferences, and one of only 3 coaches to even win a school conference. Wow, I can't talk now. One of only 3 coaches to win a national title from 2 different schools. So, Brandon, real quick before we get into these Urban Meyer awards that we're going to hand out, is there anything you want to put out here about Urban Meyer stepping down and Ryan Day taking over for the Buckeyes?
No, I mean, I mentioned earlier this week that I'm one of the few that I still have a little bit of reservations about Ryan Day. I think he's a great guy. I mean, he's a great speaker. Every press conference he's gave preseason during those first 3 games today, dude is amazing. I just, I'm a little worried about Ohio State hiring somebody for their first job. But if Urban Meyer is all for it, then I'm all for it. Like you said, with Urban Meyer, we kind of expected it at some point. You never knew if it was coming tomorrow or a month or next year or when it was coming. But you think about everything he's gone through health-wise, everything he's gone through this season, just personal-wise, how people are attacking him. And you can't blame him. And wish him the best. I hope he's still part of the athletic department, which it sounds like he will be. It sounds like they're just kind of ironing out the details there. I know I was texting with you guys. Like, I fully expect some sort of football operations type of role, assistant athletic director type of thing.
They'll create a title for him.
Yep, they will, where he'll be involved with the football team. It sounds like Ryan Day wants him to be involved. So I'm looking forward to seeing how things go. I mean, I'm more curious at this point about how the support staff shakes out. Does Kevin Wilson stay? I know it kind of seemed like Kevin Wilson was going to be leaving with Urban Meyer as the head coach. Now that Ryan Day is the head coach and there's no co-offensive coordinator stuff, does Kevin Wilson stick around, which I would love. I'm a huge Kevin Wilson fan, and I feel like he hasn't gotten the opportunity to kind of show what he can do, and I would love to see an offense purely run by Ryan Day and Kevin Wilson. Defensively, what does Ryan Day do? I mean, does Schiano stick around? Does Bill Davis stick around? I don't think Bill Davis has a chance at all to stick around. Like I told you, I'm not as big against Greg Schiano as most people are. It's been a rough year, but the past 2 years have been very good. I think Schiano is a good coach. So I wouldn't be upset if Schiano was still the defensive coordinator and kind of kept things moving forward. What I do care about defensively is what happens with the linebackers. I know we're both on the same boat there where we want Marcus Freeman. We hope it's Marcus.
Come
Freeman
home, Marcus.
Yep. So I think Freeman coming in would be a great thing. Then you look like who picks up special teams. Are they going to hire another coach for special teams? There's a few questions with that. I'm glad that Coach Mick is sticking around. I'm glad that Pantoni is sticking around. Those were the two that I was really worried about. Larry Johnson too. I know. I think you said that you saw that Larry Johnson was definitely sticking around. So, I mean, the future's bright still. The Buckeyes are a machine. They were good before Urban. They're going to be good after Urban. He's set up a very good program, a great culture, no matter what people say. And I think it's going to be good for the Buckeyes moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know. There have been times where I've been quite upset with Schiano. There have been times where Schiano has really, really made a big impact and been a great help for the Buckeyes. I believe, even though you don't want to set a guy up as a head coach taking on his first job. Like, you don't want to set him up and not really give him the reins. But I believe where it would be helpful for Ryan Day his first year or two would be to have an offensive coach or an offensive coordinator who is a head coach and a defensive coordinator who is a head coach, who understands not just the making adjustments or helping to game plan, but understands the off game day kind of stuff, the stuff during the week. They understand recruiting. They understand, the off season kind of things. So I think, honestly, one of the best things that they could do is to keep Wilson and Schiano. I'd love to see Freeman, as you talked about. I love that Larry Johnson is definitely going to stay. I think Grinch, who is still new to Columbus, is a good addition. I would like to see him given some more time. The other Johnson, I'm here or there. Nothing stood out. I'm not mad or glad about him. Coach Stud is one that I think would be an interesting keep. I would like to see him stick in Columbus. So, and oh God, I'm drawing a blank. The running backs coach.
Alford.
Yeah. So, there's a damn good staff there. So,
well, one that neither one of us brought up that needs to be made permanent, like yesterday, is Brian.
Well, I was just getting ready to say that. The next step, though, is with those guys, you have to have a few guys come up, right? You've got to get a new quarterback coach, obviously, or you've got to get a special teams coach, as you mentioned, one of the two. And, because Coach Day could potentially still coach quarterbacks, potentially. But Hartline needs to be the full-time wide receivers coach, absolutely. So with that all in mind, I know we'll get into it as the offseason progresses. What I want to do is I want to take a couple minutes here and just look back and put together a little bit of a retrospective for the Urban Meyer at Ohio State era here. So what I'm going to do is, instead of handing out postseason awards, we're going to hand out Urban Meyer era awards. Okay. First thing I want to get from you is the best offensive player at Ohio State during the Urban Meyer era, in your opinion, and go.
Oh, man. I think the best offensive player – I have two guys. So, one, I feel like –
the same one I got.
So, one, I feel like is purely the best offensive player that Ohio State's had in a very long time. However, with Urban Meyer, he had been hurt and he wasn't utilized the way that Urban Meyer would have liked, and that's Braxton Miller. He caught the tail end of it. Braxton Miller, I would have loved to see him as quarterback. But with his injuries, I'm actually going to go with Zeke. I mean, Zeke was a beast. I still love Zeke. I mean, Zeke's crazy. He's quirky. But as a Buckeye, I mean, you don't get better than what Zeke did from the blocking. I mean, some of those blocks, like that Braxton Miller spin move where Zeke just came out of nowhere and annihilated people and taking out rushers and stuff. Zeke was a beast, and I will forever miss Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke is who I have also. I mean, we talked about it on the show before. We talked about it elsewhere. It wasn't just that he was a great running back. It was the little things that he did also. He could go out on pass protection. He could go out on a route, and we've talked about that. So absolutely the best player in my mind also is Ezekiel Elliott. Now, a little bit different now that we're not just going by who the best player was. We're going by the true definition of this word, not the way some voters go with these awards now. Who was the most valuable player on offense during the Urban Meyer era?
I think the obvious answer would be JT Barrett.
Yep.
But I'm going to go with someone else.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Cardell Jones. Without Cardell, Urban Meyer never wins a national championship at Ohio State. I mean, to think about what he did in those 3 games to step in after JT Barrett went down, after Braxton Miller had went down in the fall, to be, a 3-star, just really not thought of, not a big deal, and just to step up and own that role and lead Ohio State to a victory over Wisconsin, a victory over Alabama, and then a victory over Oregon. I got to go with Cardell as most valuable player, because without him, with JT Gant down and Braxton Miller down, not many teams can turn to a third stringer like Cardell Jones and step in there. So to me, he was the most valuable player during Urban Meyer's era.
See, I'm going with JT, not only because he was the center point of the offense for the last 14 years, obviously.
17, Mike.
17, you're right, my bad. But also, my counterpoint only to what you said is, if Ohio State does not have Cardell Jones in 2014, Ohio State wins the national title in 2015. So that's the only reason I see it, because if JT has the full year to start again and stays healthy, then they beat Michigan State and they go to the playoffs that year also. So
even with Tim Beck?
Even with Tim Beck. Even with Tim Beck. But on that same note, does Herman necessarily get all the press and the love if they lose that Big Ten game, championship game to Wisconsin, and does he go to Houston right away? So
yeah,
who knows? You can't play that game, but yeah, I'm going JT.
And you can't fight with JT. Like, he's just the obvious answer. He was such a big part of that team during this whole Meyer era. And
well, yeah, he was there for all 7 years.
Yeah.
So he's still there right now.
Yeah, and he was a graduate assistant for all 4.
All right, so on the other side of the ball, this is where I think we might have a slightly different change, but who is your defensive best player?
I think you have to go with one of the Bosas here, and I think Nick was a better player, but I'm gonna go with Joey just because Joey played more. Nick never really got the opportunity. I mean, he split time so much, and then this year was supposed to be his coming out, and I mean, he dominated for those 3 games. But I'm gonna go with Joey as the best defensive player that the Buckeyes had during Urban's era.
I'm absolutely not arguing with you one bit. I also have Joey Bosa wrote down.
There you go.
So, all right. So keeping in the same token, though, who was your defensive most valuable player of the Urban Meyer era?
Man, this one's a tough one because you've got –
No, this one is the easiest question on the whole thing I asked you.
Really?
Yep. Because I have told you over and over again what was missing from this year's team, what was missing from last year's team, and it was my favorite Buckeye on defense for 7 years is Raekwon McMillan.
Yeah.
He didn't have the heart on defense. He was the most valuable player. May not have been the best, but he is the most valuable player of the Urban Meyer era on defense.
But then you think about guys like John Simon, who held that team together for a while, Zach Boren, like Malik Hooker. I mean, like, Hooker was a beast. I think Quan's a good one. Shazier, Darren Lee. I am going to go with, man, there are so many. Quan's a good one. I think I will go with, I think I'll go with Hooker. I mean, Hooker just made some good plays, and Quan's a good choice, but I think Hooker is one of those guys that, like, back there in safety, like, he makes a difference. Like, he is a safety that a college team won't see but once every, 50 years or something, like a guy that can make tackles, a guy that's fast, a guy that can cover a lot of ground, a guy that can make a lot of picks. I'm going to go with Malik Hooker.
Okay.
There are so many options, though, like that. The defense,
really are.
It's kind of crazy, like, when you start thinking about everyone that's came through defensively.
Oh, yeah. All right. So now this one I'm a little biased on just because I think it's the recent biasness that's sticking out. But who do you have as your special teams best player under Urban Meyer?
Well, I think it's got to be either Cam Johnston or Drew Crispin. I think those are the two. I'm actually going to go with Drew Crispin, even though he's still going. I mean, like, I know Adam Borland wrote like an article last week talking about just how good Chrisman was and how much of a freaking joke it was that he was not first team Big Ten, or he didn't win the Big Ten punter of the year and like all this stuff. Like, his stats are crazy, how much he's pinned people inside the 5 and how he had gone all year with no touchbacks. And then, of course, like the few days after Adam writes that at the Big Ten championship game, he has that touchback that was still like one of the most beautiful touchbacks alive, where like it landed like half a foot in and bounced straight up and went back. Like, that would have been a perfect punt if it was like 6 inches more towards the field. So, but Adam jinxed him. So this is on you, Adam. You're the reason why he had a touchback, but I'm gonna go with Chrisman.
Yeah, I think you had a couple good ones there. I actually am going with your all-time favorite Buckeye on this one. And as I said, this is a recent thing. So I'm going with Terry McLaurin, because the job he has done this year on special teams it's right up there. Drew Chrisman has a great kicking leg and ability, and it has been amplified by having Terry McLaurin as a gunner. It's kind of a tag team thing there, but yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah. Cause like, even when you asked me, like, I'm running through like punters and kickers and stuff, and like gunners did not even run down my mind. Like, that's a great one. Who was the long snapper last year too? Or 2 years ago? He was like always downfield, and he was the one that was
that Liam McCullough or something like that?
No, he's the guy now. There was the kid that was actually like, it was like Tressel's last class, and he gave him a scholarship as a long snapper. And I'm drawing a blank of what he is, but man, like, he was a beast too. And he was always the first one downfield. Like, he was the one that was down in everything inside the 5.
It'll come to me when we're in segment 2, I'm sure. So
yeah, I'm Googling it. So you start talking and I'll pretend like I'm doing something.
There we go. Well, while you're pulling that up, the next one I have for you here is one of the things that's always used to measure a coach and their success is not just the ability to win games. And it looks like you have an answer.
Bryce Haynes.
Yeah, I would not have remembered to pull that out if my life depended on it.
The Google world got it.
Way to go, the Googler. Anyways, as I was saying, not only are you measured by your ability to win games, win championships, and win, the other thing that is used to measure your ability to be a great coach is your ability to surround yourself with great position coaches. And not only do you want to develop players to go on and have a successful career in the NFL, but you want to obviously, develop them to be successful in, life after the game. The other side of it is, as a coach, you want to have coaches that are not only great coaches and able to develop these guys, but these guys then are able to move on and succeed elsewhere outside of Ohio State. It's the penalty for being successful, they say. So looking at Urban Meyer's coaching tree, and it is a very, very large coaching tree, who was the best assistant that Urban Meyer has had on his staff since he has been in Columbus?
I don't think he's liked by many Ohio State people anymore, but I got to go with Tom Herman. You look at the drop-off from the time that Herman left to the very following year, and it was just – they've had a lot of people come and go. Coach Coombs was awesome. Warner was a great offensive line coach, but I think the biggest impact was had by Tom Herman. On the recruiting trail, in the strip clubs, on the football field.
Massage parlors.
Yeah. I think Tom Herman has to be that one.
See, and I really, really thought hard about going with Tom Herman. And it's funny because the guy that I went with is just like Herman. Multiple times during his tenure in Columbus, we called for his head and wanted him thrown off the staff and, just kicked to the curb. And then he's left, and you realize that he was probably pretty damn good, and he's been pretty good since he did leave. I actually went right down I-71 and went with Luke Fickell. Fickell's 1 year as head coach at Ohio State, he went 6-7. Last year, he's turning the Bearcats around. They go 4-8, but he's went 10-2 this season. Yes, they play in a weaker conference. Yes, they are probably the worst 10-2 team in the country. But to be able to learn from Urban Meyer the same mistakes that he made in 2011 at Ohio State, he obviously learned things when he went to Cincinnati. You know, his game planning, his preparation during the week, his game day management skills. He's picked up a lot of that, and you're seeing that in Cincinnati now. So I went with Luke Fickell here. So,
well, and I think we would be all remiss without mentioning Larry Johnson too. I mean, like we've mentioned Coombs, we've mentioned Herman and Fickell and like the big names, but Larry Johnson has been a beast for the Buckeyes, for Urban Meyer, and you got to give him a special shout out too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that defensive line has helped carry this team up, you know, multiple seasons. So now looking back here, I got two of them for you that are going to be specific instances that I want your input on. One is, what is the best or most memorable or most impactful play of the Urban Meyer era? And I'm pretty sure I know where you're going with this, but go ahead and let me hear it.
I think it has to be the 80 yards to the heart of the South, the Zeke
85.
run. 85 yards, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 85. Whatever. The Zeke run against Alabama, dagger in the heart, stomp on their nuts, go back to your trailer, bang your sister, run by Zeke Elliott.
Yep. I really thought hard. It only came down, there's only a couple that truly stick out, right? Like you have Hooker's that first interception, you know, the first game I think is against like Bowling Green. You know, he jumped like 14 foot in the air. I mean, that's a great play. You have how many walk-off sacks against Penn State, or, you know, walk-off tackles for loss. It was like 3 years in a row. Bosa, and then Chase Young this year, and who was it? Sam Hubbard in the middle there. But yeah, you have to go with beating Alabama and securing the SEC is off our back thing at Ohio State. That play is the one that sticks out. And, you know, it's so funny because as things have progressed over the years, and even though that wasn't that long ago, this has taken on a bit of the Christian Laettner game at Duke versus Kentucky. How many people out there, when they stop and think about it, do not realize that wasn't the national championship game that year? But that's the play you remember, you know, and it's just like that shot with Christian Laettner and everything. So definitely there. So, or
the Carlton Fisk home run.
Against
the Reds.
They all think the Red Sox won that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the last one I have for you before we pause, what was the best moment of the Urban Meyer era for you?
Man, see, that's a little more in depth, man. You're supposed to be tossing me softballs.
I'm a softball like player. 8 of them in a row, man.
I know. And then you come in with, what the hell is this? So best moment. I mean, I think for me, it easily has to be winning the national championship. I mean, that was just an awesome moment. I don't know. I mean, like just how they went through Alabama, they went through Oregon. They were kind of underdogs for both. They had to go through a couple Heisman finalists to do this, even with the Big Ten.
TTUN and Baylor. And
yeah, I mean, it just I think that has to be the best moment, seeing how excited he was to bring a championship back to Ohio, seeing him and Shelley celebrate, seeing Zeke doing his weird trout thing, his fish thing, like.
Yeah, what was it? Is it salmon or something?
Yeah, the salmon. Yeah. That's what it was. Like, it was weird, but it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And I was living in Hawaii at the time, so it wasn't even crazy late. So, like, I was able to enjoy it. So, for me, I think that's the best moment.
See, and going all the way back to, I remember when Urban Meyer was hired at Bowling Green. not that I knew who he was. I just remember the coaching change. It was right after we were in school. And, I went to college up near Bowling Green, so they were in the news all the time. And I just, for whatever reason, I always liked Urban. Even when he went to Florida and he beat Ohio State, I hated the fact that he beat Ohio State and he was an Ohio boy doing it, but I always had a lot of respect for him. I loved what he did. But for me, the best moment of Urban Meyer's Ohio State career was when Carlos Hyde finally topped 1,000 yards and he got that monkey off his back. Because all you ever heard was Urban Meyer was a good offensive coach, but he couldn't turn a running back into a 1,000-yard rusher. He couldn't turn a running back into a pro. And when Carlos Hyde, who was another one of my favorite Buckeyes during this era, was able to go over 1,000 yards that year, that was the one that did it for me. Because now it's just been, you have 1,000-yard, 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 but that was the one that really set it in stone. And that was probably my favorite moment. So.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right, man. So any last thing you want to go on here before we pause? Because we're going to do a little bit different this week, but I want to give you one last shot here if you got anything.
If you haven't yet, by the time you hear this on Thursday, I'm sure Mike hasn't even looked at it yet, and I haven't got to listen to the sound. I just watched the video. But Ohio State put out a video thanking Coach Meyer, and it's a bunch of highlights of Urban Meyer and his time at Ohio State, and it seems pretty awesome. So make sure you check that out if you haven't for some reason by the time that you hear us on Thursday.
All right. That sounds good, man. So on that note, what we're going to do is we're going to stop here for a minute. Instead of doing our commercial, I want to give you guys a little rundown. Normally we have a commercial every week. We have our sponsors. We were going to put something together this week, and what we're actually going to do is we're going to stop for a minute. Instead of making fun of Washington or the college football playoffs or anything like that, we are actually going to take a few moments here and do exactly what Brandon was just talking about with the video, but we're going to take a minute and we're going to send our thanks to Urban Meyer. So we're going to pause and we'll do that.
As a Buckeye fan, I think it's been amazing to have Urban Meyer as a head coach these past 7 years. The way it works out, it's kind of crazy when you think about it. I don't live in Ohio. I haven't lived in Ohio for almost 19 years now, but I managed to, just the way it worked out, that I saw Urban Meyer's first home game. I saw Urban Meyer's last home game, and thinking about where he has taken this program from the time that I watched him in that very first game where they struggled against, I think it was Miami. It was really until Devin Smith made this amazing touchdown grab that it kind of got things rolling to where they are now, where they are just a dominant force. They've got so many great players. They've got a great coaching staff. It's just, as a Buckeye fan, it's just amazing to be a part of this, and I'm proud of it. I know this past year has been rough for everyone involved, but as somebody that doesn't live in Ohio and somebody that has to deal with non-Big Ten fans and non-Ohio State fans, just what Urban Meyer's done for this team is amazing. I don't think any of us will really realize how good we had it until a few years down the road, where no longer are we upset about only winning by 21 points or something. It's not too long ago that Jim Tressel was our coach and we loved him, but every game was, a 7 to 10 point win. We're kind of spoiled with Urban Meyer, and we can only thank him for that. So as a Buckeye fan, as someone that uses Ohio State football to keep close to the state of Ohio where he grew up, to keep in contact with people that he cares about, I thank Urban Meyer for what he's done, and I wish him the best, and I hope he sticks around forever within the athletic department.
All right. Yeah, I'm in a similar boat as you, obviously. I've not lived in Ohio, not quite as long as you have, but I haven't been in Ohio for 8, 9, 10 years, something like that now. It is definitely something that has been amazing just to see the team that we follow so much. And, we pour into every weekend. We pour into the podcast. We pour into the stuff that we write. Just interacting with other fans and, that kind of thing. It's crazy. But what it's really done, and I know for me personally, like even this weekend after the Big Ten title game, I walked into a grocery store here in Texas. I'm in Houston, Texas, Katy, Texas, and I have on my Ohio State shirt. And I have one lady stop me. She's from Ohio, talks about how great the game was and how proud she was of the team. Actually ran into a guy that came up and started talking to me. He was a Georgia fan who couldn't believe that, the whole how Georgia was ranked ahead of us. He didn't think that was the right thing to do. But, just seeing the pride come back out and the fact that, you can be proud to be a Buckeye. And I know it wasn't that you couldn't be proud before, but Urban Meyer elevated that, like you said, to a whole different level. It's tied us in, as you mentioned, so much to the town and the city and the state that we grew up in, the people that are there. And, it's just nice to see that connection strengthened with an Ohio guy there running the program and doing it apparently the right way. Makes you, like I said, you're proud to be a Buckeye. You're proud to be from the state of Ohio with what Urban Meyer has done at the school. So, from the bottom of my heart, I wish him all the best. I thank his family for giving him to us for the last 7 years. And, I hope that we feel his impact for many years to come, because he is a true asset to Buckeye Nation. So, thanks, Urban. With that in mind, let's get back to the real reason that we're here.
Strippers blow.
Yeah. All right. So obviously, let's take a quick minute. We're going to look back at the Northwestern game. Ohio State wins the Big Ten title, beat Northwestern 45-24. Dwayne Haskins, another amazing week at Ohio State. Probably his last Big Ten action for the Buckeyes. He goes 34 for 41, 83% completion, 499 yards, 5 touchdowns. Was not absolutely perfect. Obviously, he had one pick and a couple other, passes that you were left scratching your head a little bit on. But, like I said, he completed 83% of his passes. Less than ideal output from our running backs, only 119 yards rushing. But looking at the game on offense, what was your takeaway from the Big Ten title game, Brandon?
Remind me of those stats, man. Like, I remember that I hate Urban Meyer, and I'm glad he's leaving. Like, I said last week that Dwayne Haskins, like, I went out on a limb and said he was going to throw for 500 yards. And Urban Meyer cost me by 1 yard.
He knew he was doing that for you because he listened.
Get out of here, Urban Meyer. Nobody wants you. All those nice things we all said about, no. It's honestly, offensively, even as good of a game as Dwayne Haskins go, I was frustrated as shit during this game.
Oh, my God.
Because it was so blatantly obvious that Ohio State could throw at will on Northwestern. We said that going into the game, that they'd be able to throw all over them. And Dwayne Haskins would throw all over them, but they were so dead set on trying to get something going for Mike Weber for the longest period of time. And then they switched over to J.K. Dobbins and figured they would get something going. And the whole time, like, they literally could have just thrown the ball with Dwayne Haskins 70 times that game, and he would have thrown for roughly 1,000 yards, and they would have won by, 70 points. Like, Northwestern was not stopping that Buckeye passing game. And the only one that stopped that passing game was the Ohio State offense of coaching staff.
Right.
So, Dwayne Haskins, he's became, I was a big fan of him preseason, and everyone knows that. I talked him up as good as I could. Preseason stats, I think I had him throwing for like 3,700 yards or something around there, breaking all these records. And I shortchanged him a shitload. So even from where he was at the beginning of the season, where I thought he was very good, to where he is now, like watching him in that Northwestern game, watching him in that game against Team Up North, it's amazing how good Dwayne Haskins is. And there is no reason he's coming back. I would love for him to, but like, Dwayne Haskins is done. He is going to go to the pros. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And I think the Rose Bowl, they're going to let Dwayne Haskins, they're going to let Johnny Dixon, they're going to let Paris Campbell, they're going to let Terry McLaurin just kind of go to town on a very, very slow Washington defense.
I honestly think, and I know we're not really looking at the Rose Bowl yet, but I'm going to go out here and tell you expect 3 and 4 wide as the regular set because of what Haskins and those senior wide receivers can do. It was mind-numbing to see when Ohio State tried to run the ball. And I even put it out there, and I put it on Twitter, that when Sunday rolls around and you're looking at why Oklahoma got the option to go to the playoffs and Ohio State didn't, remember how Ohio State went away from everything that had worked that game. So, it was parts of it were crazy, but, Haskins had an amazing game. Dixon went for 129 yards and a touchdown. Paris Campbell would have had a bigger game had he not been injured. I think he was a little shook up even after that, even though he came back in. I was a little shocked to not see KJ Hill have a more of an impact. But no, overall, offensively, it was a really good game. What about when Northwestern had the ball? What did you think of the defense? Was it just more of the same? Was there anything that stuck out to you? Was there anything that you didn't like? I mean, we've said it all along, and I have mentioned it on here 100 times. There's always going to be one fluke play where somebody that we're playing that's way below us talent-wise has a long touchdown. It goes all the way back from, before Urban Meyer's time here. you'd play like Navy back before they went to the running or the option. They'd have like a 70-yard touchdown screen pass, right? And it just happens. It happens. You had that one 77-yard run. The guy turns around with 78 yards for the game. So you have those flukes. But what did you think out of the defense? Because there were definitely some bright spots on the defense.
I think the defense is coming together, and I think Shiano's figured out what he needs to do with these people. I thought the defensive line played very well. Chase Young had another just dominant game. Like, Chase Young next year, guys, is going to be unstoppable, and he would have been even more this year if he had Nick Bosa on the other side of him. I mean, let's just stop talking about Northwestern for a second. Like, think about this year. Think about how dominant Draymond Jones was. Think about how dominant Nick Bosa would have been. And then think about what Chase Young would have been able to do with not being double teamed, just being a young guy, being able to run. He had a dominant year. He took over games against Penn State. He took over games against Michigan, against Northwestern. Chase Young is going to be amazing to watch next year as long as he stays healthy. But back to the game, I thought the defensive line played good. Linebackers, once again, Pete Werner, I don't think he made a play. I don't know. Like, I don't picture him at all. Like, I know he is on the field. I see him on the field. But I can't think of one play he's made since, like, week one. So, Tough Borland made a few nice plays. Long run by Moten, like you said. Like, that Kendall Sheffield, he's about to get railed by me. But, like, on that play, I thought Kendall Sheffield was held. I think there was a face mask there. I think Chase Young was held. There was so much on that play. Like, Kendall Sheffield was held, wasn't able to turn around and run, and then he was pushed from behind and pushed down, and somehow it was all missed. So, Kendall Sheffield, though, I thought he struggled. He's been struggling for weeks. Like, I'm not sure what his deal is. I'm not sure if they need to move him. I would assume he's probably going to go pro, and he'll combine well. And he'll do good and get drafted, like second, third round type of thing, just because of his size and his speed. But as a cornerback, I don't think he's good. I feel like he's kind of regressed this year. Even like he's supposed to be so fast but like on plays, like he doesn't make up ground on anyone, like whether it's a tight end or a running back or anyone. Like, so I don't know what's going on with him. I was encouraged to see the way that Okudah played. I thought Sean Wade has been playing awesome. I think Sean Wade and Okudah, if they're the starting two cornerbacks next year, are going to be dominant. And then you throw in a young guy kind of in that nickel, like a Tyreek Johnson or someone like that. Brandon White struggling a little bit, but I still think he's going to be good. Jordan Fuller should be back, but I think against Northwestern, the back seven played okay. The defensive line played good, and linebackers were okay, but a lot better than what they have been.
Okay. So now there was definitely a little bit of some flatness after halftime. And I know you'd mentioned you have a theory as to what that was from. So do you still want to touch on that one?
Well, I feel like a jerk kind of saying it now, but I honestly put that blame on Urban Meyer. I know he's retired now, but like Urban Meyer at the end of that first half got the ball back with like a minute plus, a high-powered offense, and I think he had one or two timeouts there, and he chose to just kind of down it. And like they had a chance to go for the throat. They had a chance to, put Northwestern away quick in that first half and drive downfield and score a touchdown and go up, 31-7 or something. And he chose to just kneel it and not really try. And I think that kind of set the tone for the team. Like the team wants to go score points. The team I think that made the team go a little lackadaisical when they came out that way, and then it took them a second to kind of wake up, and Northwestern was able to just push the ball all over them. So I know it's bad to say right now because everything that's happened since then, but like I put the beginning of the second half on Urban Meyer because of his coaching at the end of the first half.
Okay. Well, real quick, let's take a look back at the, what we listed as our keys to the game like we do every week. Obviously, the Haskins 60% completions, he was over at 83%. Rushing yards at 150, we were under that at 119. Any receiver over 100 yards, I think you'd said that there were going to be like 14 of them over 100 yards, but there was just one with Johnny Dixon. Asked about 2 sacks, and they went over that. There was actually 5, led by Chase Young having his 3. Northwestern having rushing yards under 100. We both kind of figured they'd be a little over. I think we both were projecting about the 125 mark. They actually ended up with 151. And the defense actually forced not just 1, but 3 turnovers. So that was over what we were projecting. Now, before we pause and do our Son of a Schmidt and get our last bit of Schmidt picks in here for before bowl season starts, any last little bit you want to put on the record about Northwestern or the regular season?
No, I mean, it was I guess I will say I feel like this season was very emotionally draining as a fan.
Yep.
And I'm not going to lie, like when that final whistle blew, I was a little bit relieved that the season was over. For us having to talk about it, cover it, guys writing with us, we're constantly in group chats or Slack, or it's just like this year has been an emotionally draining year as a fan. And I was kind of glad for it to be done. Like, I want to see this bowl game. I want to see the Rose Bowl. I want them to just dominate. But I'm ready for this year to be over. And I know it's the, lame-ass pun that's kind of been put out there for everyone, but it's a new day for Ohio State football. And I think with Ryan Day coming in, I think that it's a good time to be a Buckeye fan, and we can kind of just turn the page on this year and hope that nothing like this ever happens again.
Yeah, I've said it before. I never want to see the season end because I love college football. I love spending my whole Saturdays waking up, watching football from the time I'm really getting around and becoming conscious until it's time to go to bed. But I echo that. It was a hard season as a fan. I can't imagine for the coaching staff or the players. So I'm glad that one's behind us. Ohio State's ended up, good enough. Yeah, good season. So on that note, let's pause. We'll come back. We'll get your Son of a Schmidt, and then we got some big news for our Schmidt picks, and we'll go from there. So we'll be right here in a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for your favorite weekly segment.
Son of a Schmidt.
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 Now, I'm not a detective or anything by that means, but I have a belief based off of something you said earlier. I kind of have an idea where your Son of a Schmidt's going this week, but why don't you go ahead and put this one out here, buddy, because you kind of led on that you were going to rail on somebody. So what do you got for us?
Where do you think I'm going with it?
Well, if you don't take into account today's news, I was assuming it was going to be something about Kendall Sheffield because you told me you were going to rail on him. So that may or may not be the case, but that's my belief.
No, I actually am not going to go after Kendall Sheffield too much. I said, I think he's struggling. I think he's a weak link, but I don't know. I already kind of did my rant now that I think about it. I want to talk about the college football playoff committee quite a bit, and I already did earlier. I think, man, I think I blew my load too early. No, yeah, I mean, I'll just continue on with the college football playoff committee just a little bit and the whole playoffs. Or I could go with the Nebraska route. I literally had somebody come up to me today, a Nebraska fan, and ask me, this guy that I've known for years, him and I were stationed together back in California. He just happens to be stationed out here in Colorado now, asking me if Urban Meyer retired because he was scared of Nebraska, the Cornhuskers of all people. I didn't know how to respond to that. I still don't. There is like less than 0% of me that thinks that was the case. But according to him, Nebraska is going to take over the Big Ten in 2 years, and Urban Meyer was scared and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, I don't even know where to go with this because I wound up having a pretty good rant about what I wanted to talk about earlier. You just gave me the door, and I jumped into that college football playoffs like right away.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go a somewhat tied into the same route with you, but I had mentioned on Twitter on Saturday that you needed to take a minute as a Buckeye fan and pause and just appreciate how good this Ohio State offense, the passing offense, was this year. Dwayne Haskins currently has, I believe it was number 35 all time for the most passing yards in a single season in NCAA history. So ended up being pretty well, a pretty good season for him. So where my rant comes in is I had somebody that told me that this was a mentality that they hated. And I asked them to explain, and they tell me that we didn't make the playoffs. The season is lost. It doesn't matter. It's unsatisfactory. And my problem with that is Ohio State goes 12-1. They win the Big Ten East. They demolished Michigan. They win the Big Ten. They're going to the Rose Bowl, which is still the granddaddy of them all. It's still the best bowl game. And they have a chance to send Urban Meyer out with less than 10 losses at Ohio State now. I don't understand how that is a lost season. And this person's response was, it's in the new format. If you aren't in the playoffs, the season is a failure. And they said, and this is what pisses me off. Bama would be thinking like me. We should have Bama expectations, championship or bust mentality. We aren't winning the championship, so the season doesn't matter. It's lost. Now, the problem with this is, if that's what you're measuring yourself on now, what were you measuring yourself on during the BCS? Because it's the same thing as it was back then. It's the same thing as it was before the BCS, when it was just a matter of, hey, what happens if you're not one of the top 2 ranked teams and it comes down, you're not playing each other. Back before the BCS came out, it was you play your bowl game, and if they think you did better than the other team, then you could move up. Otherwise, you weren't winning the championship. So as much as we want to win a national title, and as much as Ohio State should have been playing for one at the beginning of the season, as we talked about, going 12-1, winning the Big Ten, and going to the Rose Bowl is still a damn good season. It is not a failure of a season. That mentality needs to stop, and quite frankly, it is sickening that people think that way. You're not going to win every game every season. It's just not going to happen. UCF has done it because they don't play anyone, as we talked about. You're not going to go undefeated every year in the Big Ten. So get that out of your mind. Stop being stupid fans, son of a Schmidt.
Hearing you talk about winning every game, it reminded me of the quote that Ryan Day said today. Like, you learn things quick when he became a coach at Ohio State. Like, the number one goal is to beat the rival. Number two goal is to win every other game. So, like,
right?
It's funny what the expectation is.
So, all right, man, we'll pause real quick. We come back. Not a whole lot of games to pick through this week, but we'll go from here, and then we'll wrap this one up. So hold on a second.
You are listening to the Sons of Schmidt podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, presented by Hayes and Cannon. The ORN is the online radio home of the Buckeye Sloopcast, the Silver Bullets podcast, Across the Field, and, of course, the Sons of Schmidt, with new episodes broadcast every day of the week. For more information, go to www.theozone.net. And now, back to the show.
All right, Brandon. So big news in the Schmidt Pick department. Last week, of the games we had on the docket, we had the Washington game, the Texas-Oklahoma game, UCF-Memphis, Bama-Georgia, Clemson-Pitt, Boise State-Fresno State, and Ohio State-Northwestern. Your picks were Washington, Texas, UCF, Bama, Clemson, Boise State, and Ohio State. You missed the Texas game and the Boise State game. Takes you to 58-24 for the season. I had the exact same picks except for the Fresno State pick, which I literally took on a
Allegedly.
whim. Allegedly. Do we need to go to the audio? I will.
Somebody needs to, that listens to the show, because I don't listen to shitty podcasts, to tell me if Mike really picked Fresno State last week. Because when he sent me the showrunner,
I'm gonna splice in the run. I'm gonna splice in the audio right here. So hold for a second, because here it comes.
In the WAC, it's Fresno State at Boise State. What do you got in this one?
Well, like I was saying, that 11 through 25 is just like different shit kind of moved around to look pretty. Boise State 22 in the college football playoff poll, Fresno State 25. Somehow both of those teams are top 25 teams in their minds, but God, like they're all. You know what's funny now I think about it? Like, wasn't Fresno State thrown into the top 25 the week before the conference championship last year too? Remember they had to make Alabama have a top 25 one? Yeah, so Fresno State just knows how to do it. They just slide in at the last second. So I don't know. I'm going to go Boise State. I went against them last week, and that's what cost me. So I'm going to go with Boise State.
Well, I have absolutely zero confidence in this. So just for the hell of it, and after this, the only game we'll have left before the bowl season is Army-Navy. I'm going to go opposite of you.
That's whack.
You said Boise State. I'll go Fresno State because I just flipped the coin in my head.
So, anyways, that takes me. I took the lead the last week of the season.
Allegedly.
59-23. Put an asterisk next to it. It's still I'm in the lead. I make the rules. You just play by them. So this week we have one game. It is quite possibly one of the biggest games as far as pageantry and the history of college football. A rivalry that matches Ohio State-Michigan as far as intensity, but not the hatred because of the respect that is between Army West Point and the Naval Academy.
Oh, I thought we were talking about Alabama and Colgate.
No, that's the week after.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's their first-round playoff game.
Gotcha.
This game takes place in Philadelphia. Even if you're not a fan of either of these teams, neither of us are, it is still fun to watch. It's a great way to end the regular season for football. I truly enjoy sitting around and seeing what happens. And, they always bust out the special uniforms. And like this year, I know the Army's honoring, First Mountain, Big Red 1, I think it is, right?
Big Red 1, yep.
So I forget exactly what I don't know. I know it's Big Red 1, but that was actually the division that my aunt and uncle were in. So they're pretty excited about it. And I think those uniforms are pretty badass. But technically, from what I was seeing, this is a Navy at Army game. Like I said, the game's in Philadelphia. You'll get to see all the cadets and everything there and their whole thing. So I know with me taking over the lead and you not wanting to do this, I'm going to go ahead and make my pick first. I'll do you that favor. After seeing what Army did against Oklahoma, I'm taking Army in this game, but I'm going to let you make your selection now. Do we go with the same one, or are you taking Navy?
I think I'm pretty positive that Army is going to win but I'm gonna have to go with Navy just so.
Just to split it.
Yeah, just split it. But Army's gonna win. But I'll take Navy, so I get credit either way.
Oh, is that how it works? That's a pretty good trick, man. I'll give you that. No, in all honesty, I do gotta say this was a pretty good week last week for me because not only did I do that, but I also picked that Ohio State was going to score 45 points. So I just thought that was, that just shows how on I was last week.
Yeah, it would have been even better if you would have picked Fresno State.
I'm telling you, I almost spliced the audio in again right here just to shove it in your face.
I won't be listening.
Oh, I'm going to email it to you. Trust me. So anyways, last thing here before we wrap this one up, man, do you got anything else you want to put out here? I mean, I know it was a slow news week and there's nothing to talk about, but any last thing you want to get out here, man?
The last thing I want to get out there, I meant to talk about it earlier. Probably should have been my son of a Schmidt. But I think it's painfully obvious at this point that Ohio State was blackballed this year from the playoffs, never being an actual contender to the playoffs. I feel like if they would have went undefeated, they would have had to make it. Seeing how the committee treated them, seeing how the players have been treated during postseason award time, how like Dwayne Haskins wasn't even like Davey O'Brien, and he's not really a contender for the Heisman, even though he's in there. Guys like Draymond Jones not being recognized for anything. I think
like Paris Campbell not being first team All Big Ten by both.
Yeah, I mean, like there are so many examples where I think the preseason fake stuff that happened to Ohio State has carried on, and I think the media, the College Football Playoff Committee has taken it into their own hands to kind of punish Ohio State for what they perceive Urban Meyer has done. And like I told you and a few guys in the text, I feel like that weighs into some of why Urban Meyer left. Is the university, the football team was being punished for perceived actions of Urban Meyer. So I think it's obvious to say right now.
Okay. All right. The only thing I would say is we have a new coach that's going to take over. And I'm just going to warn everybody now, as great as Ryan Day will probably be and as great as this team's going to be, remember next year it's a new coach. Remember it's a new program. If Ohio State goes 10-2 next year, that's still a damn successful season. So just tame your expectations just a little bit there. So, all right. That's all I've got, man. Any last thing you want to put on here? I'm going to close this one up and we're going to wrap it out.
Nope. Go
all
Bucks.
Right. Go Bucks. OH.
IO.
Buckeye Nation, make sure you're getting the latest news and episodes from the Sons of Schmidt podcast. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Sons of Schmidt. You can follow us on Twitter at Sons of Schmidt, or email the show, sonsofschmidt@gmail.com. And look for us on Hayes and Cannon at theozone.net.